What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here. So, I was not actually expecting to do a review of today's game for two reasons mainly. First of all, I had a Thanksgiving lunch planned with my family, and the game for me started at 12:45, so I figured I was going to miss it, which I could have just watched the replay later and done a review and all that, which would have been fine. But honestly, the second reason kept me from thinking that was a good option, which is it's the Conference League. And especially after our last performance, I feel like there's not a whole lot to be gleaned from matches like that. I've talked about it a little bit in the past whenever I've reviewed FA Cup matches. If we play a lower side, oftentimes I feel like I don't really have much to say outside of, yeah, they played well. And if they didn't play well, it's even more embarrassing because you're playing a lesser side. So after the Noah match, I kind of had it in my mind that I probably wouldn't be reviewing that many more Conference League matches, maybe later on down the line when we get into the knockout stages. Going into this one, I looked at it, I was like, Heidenheim, no idea who that is. So I'll kind of glance at it throughout lunch and, we'll see if there's anything to talk about. And then the game ended 2-0, and I did see Heidenheim created quite a few chances against us, so I'm thinking, wow, this must have been a pretty poor performance from us if we let them in the game that much. So I decided to sit down and actually watch through the game later when the replay came on. And listening to the commentator talk about it, I realized maybe Heidenheim was not as little known as I thought, because yeah, their story is actually really incredible. I did a little bit of digging before I started this review just to further expound upon what the commentator was talking about. But yeah, rising all the way up from the bottom basically, and they're a club that's not really been around that long. The manager has basically been here since this version of the club was formed. He's been here since 2007, which is an incredible run as a manager. And then on top of that, first season in the Bundesliga, and they finish 8th and make it to Europe. Honestly, it's quite incredible. So on that note, and knowing that there's going to be a lot of hype around this, they're facing one of the biggest clubs coming out of England. That's huge for a club like this. First season in Europe, and you're facing Chelsea at your place. That is a huge draw. Knowing all of that now, I sort of realized that this is not a pushover of a team. The Bundesliga is a solid league. If we faced anybody from Spain or from Italy is kind of a toss-up. If we faced any teams from there, Fiorentina, I think, is in this league as well. So if we faced a team like that, I would obviously not be expecting it to be an easy match. So with that in mind, I'm going into it thinking this is not a side that is non-league level like Noah. This is more of a League One to a championship side, in which case this is probably the best test that this B team, if you want to call them that, has faced. Because so far we faced a League Two side in Barrow, and we faced a lot of sides that honestly were not that great. Panathinaikos was probably the toughest test we had. Yeah, they're typically a team that's in Europe, but they're not really one of the better teams in Europe. They're thereabouts. They can sometimes pull off a shock performance, but more often than not, they're getting beat. And then obviously the toughest test that the second team has faced has been Newcastle, and that's too much of a test. It's almost like if you're going into a math class and the teacher's constantly giving you a bunch of simple algebra problems and you're just easily solving them, and then all of a sudden just gives you some of the hardest trigonometry you've ever seen. Obviously, that neither of those are really going to test your knowledge in math. Same thing here. We're facing a bunch of easy teams, and then you face a good Premier League side in Newcastle at their place. We still don't really know what this second team is really about. This, I think, is probably the best test for them. It's a good team coming out of Germany. It's at their place. The crowd's going to be rocking. First time in Europe. It's going to be a tough test. It's going to be something that's really going to challenge them. So with that in mind, I think looking at this game, for the most part, they performed admirably. I do think there are some issues still with some of these players that are keeping most of them out of the first team picture. But I look at the overall team performance, and I think we definitely created some of the best chances. If you look at all of the chances that were created that probably should have been finished, I would say the game probably would have ended maybe 6-3 us, because we missed several great chances. They missed a few really good chances. And with that in mind, I'm okay with that, because we know this team is lacking defensively. The attack is typically where we see our best performances. And yeah, the finishing probably should have been better tonight. However, I will say the overall attack looked pretty solid. We created good chances. We were looking dangerous. It wasn't the Newcastle match where we were hardly creating much of anything. And I will say I'll give credit to Maresca for trying a couple things a little differently. He dropped Nkunku back into the 10, put Guiu up top. And I think that's something that a lot of Chelsea fans have been asking for because we know Nkunku is better playing in behind a striker. Unfortunately, we'll talk about Guiu when we get to it. I do think Nkunku probably does need a true striker up there, a striker that is good quality. And that is the first thing I did want to touch on is this whole conversation that's been had for a couple weeks about do we need another striker? Here's the thing. We don't need to replace Jackson. I think Jackson is playing perfectly fine. He's filling that role very well. He's scoring. He's making the overall team play better. So I don't think we need to be trying to replace Jackson. However, I do think we need a backup. I do think we need a solid second option because Nkunku is not a 9. Guiu is not ready. We need another backup option for Jackson. I don't think we need to go sign somebody like Osimhen, who he's not necessarily a young gun that is trying to make it. He's already kind of made it. He's been top striker at Napoli, I think, for a few years now. I would prefer somebody that is maybe a bit younger. I know there's been talk about Evan Ferguson. That might be fine. Liam Delap is another one they've been looking at. That might be okay too. Gyökeres, maybe. There are definitely some younger players out there that could have potential to grow, but already are accomplishing what we need a second striker, a backup striker to do, that Guiu is just not getting done for us right now. And I think if you bring a striker like that in and pair them with Nkunku for the second team, that's very solid. And I think we easily cruise through a lot of the Conference League, but also I think we handle the FA Cup pretty well too, because I think that's something where we are going to struggle. We already saw it in the Carabao Cup. When we face the Premier League sides that are going to be putting some Premier League players out there, I don't think we have a true quality striker number 10 option that's going to make us dangerous in games like those. So I would say getting a better option in this second team. I know also they were looking at John Duran, and obviously he's come off the bench and done well for Villa. He doesn't seem to be getting much more time for them though, so it might be a good option to go get him and say, hey, you'll at least be starting in these European competitions and in the FA Cup, since I don't really think he's getting that even for Villa. But I do think that is something that probably needs to be looked at in January. I know there's a lot of talk that Nkunku might be upset, might want to leave. I'm hoping if they go get a striker, that'll kind of keep him from leaving. I know that sounds weird because you get a backup striker, you would think that would take his position, but in reality, I think he's a 10. So we're not really replacing him up top. We are finding another option that is going to put him back in the position he needs to be. Now, how that's going to work between him, Palmer, and Felix, obviously we saw a little bit of what might happen in the weekend against Leicester with Palmer and Felix both playing in there. But I don't think that's going to be every week. I think it's going to change based on who we have available, the injuries, and maybe what works for the situation. But I do think if we bring in a second striker, I think we'll see them start these European competitions, and I think we'll see Nkunku play probably a lot more as the number 10 in behind him, or even step into the first team as the second number 10 alongside Palmer. But moving on to the game, first of all, just a quick mention about the refereeing because yeah, it was pretty bad, and I'll be honest, I saw some of the highlights from the other matches. Refereeing quality today was really bad. I mean, between the ref we had in our match, and then you look at there were two big handball decisions that were very poorly handled. First of all, the handball for, I had to look it up, it was the Frankfurt-Midtjylland game. There was a handball that led to a penalty that won the game for Frankfurt, which was terrible. I mean, defender is basically, he's got himself big, and the striker takes a shot and hits it straight into his hand. He doesn't move his hand. He just shoots it at his hand. No, the striker doesn't even ask, or I don't think it was the striker, whatever. The player doesn't even ask for the handball. Like the player that kicked it off of his hand did not even ask for the handball. He went to go take the corner. And then VAR steps in and says, hey, you should look at this. And the center ref says, yeah, that's a penalty. Incredible stuff. You look at Onana for Man U, should have been sent off, because that was not just one, it was two times that he clearly handled the ball. And it wasn't like he was putting his hand down to steady himself. That's what his other hand was doing. So this hand that was down here and out and blocking the striker from taking it past him, that's a handball. The referee looked at it, said, no handball. VAR said, yeah, that's good. And he gets away with it. And Man U go on to win the match. So two very, very blatant mistakes there from referees. And the one in the Frankfurt match, by the way, Craig Pawson was the center ref. Big shock there that he's making mistakes. But then you get into our game, and it starts right away, which I actually missed this because I didn't watch the first 3 minutes because I started a little late. But first minute, he's already given a yellow for a simple Badiashile going across and basically getting in front of the guy. Guy goes down holding his face. Yellow card for that. First minute. So already he's set the tone that he's willing to give yellow for soft fouls. And of course that comes into play later with Cassidy, where that's just a simple touch on the shoulder. Maybe a little silly to put any sort of contact in when he's breaking away in the last minute of the match. But yeah, it's soft. It's not really a foul. There's contact. The guy goes over easily. Referee, I honestly don't even think he knew that Cassidy was on a yellow. I think he just gave it because, oh yeah, he fell over, it was breaking away, so yeah, that's a yellow card. And then I think he realized after, oh right, he was already on a yellow. Oh, whoops. Well, I'm not taking it back now, so you're gone. So both of those were very soft yellow cards. A lot of the fouls were very inconsistent throughout the match. Sometimes he would call the little nudges and they'd fall over. Sometimes he wouldn't. It's very all over the place. And then the penalty was just embarrassing that he overturned that. It's funny because the commentator was so confused. He thought he hadn't given the penalty, but he clearly did. Because Nkuku came over and asked him, he gave him the nod, so Nkuku grabbed the ball to take the penalty. VAR called him over. He did the VAR symbol to say, no, I'm changing my mind, no penalty. And there's no reason to overturn it. Mudryk got clipped. He doesn't initiate the contact. The defender stuck his leg in the way, catches his right leg, takes him down. It's a little soft, but there's contact. And as much as we've heard about VAR trying to raise the bar, I know that's kind of more so in England, but in general, VAR should not be overturning. If there's contact and the referee called the penalty, you stay with it. You stay, unless the player initiated the contact, you stay with the decision on the field. It doesn't matter how soft it is. It doesn't matter if there's minimal contact that shouldn't bring him down. If the referee made a decision based on the contact that he saw, you stick with the decision, whether he called it or didn't. So the fact that he overturned it, embarrassing. It was truly embarrassing. So obviously it didn't end up mattering because we ended up going on and winning it, but it could have been a little bit more comfortable if he didn't make the stupid decision to overturn that penalty and we did score in the first half. I think we would have been maybe a little bit more comfortable, or who knows, maybe if we go into halftime 1-0 up, we're too comfortable and then they come out and score and now we're nervous. So it could have changed the game in a lot of different ways. But the fact, like I said, fact that there was contact means VAR should not be stepping in at all. That's not what you're there for. You're not there to re-referee. You're there to correct obvious mistakes. That was not an obvious mistake. It was very apparent it could go either way. Stick with the decision on the field. But to quickly run through individuals, Jorgensen, I think, made a good case for himself today. A lot of really, really good saves. And his passing was pretty solid. I mean, a couple were a little scary. There was the one, Badiashile gives him a bad pass, but then he takes a little bit too long. He's not even aware of the guy charging from his left side. He's got to be a little bit more aware in those situations, but his passing was pretty good. He didn't have any stupid giveaways. He was definitely not passing as poorly as Sanchez does, but he also made a lot of really game-clinching saves for us as well. I will say he probably did give himself a good case for Maresca to say, if Sanchez has a couple more bad games, probably going to make that switch. I don't think he's going to right now or even within the next 2 games. I think it would take Sanchez having a couple more where he just absolutely stinks it up on the pitch, maybe gives away a game or gives away a cheap goal from a bad pass or a missed save. Because he's shown that he's not willing to make changes easily. It typically takes a couple of issues with a player before he's willing to say, all right, well, let's try something else instead. But going back to Jorgensen, though, like I said, great performance tonight, and hopefully we see a little bit more of that from him. Back four is similar to what we've seen without having a true right back in there. So Disasi on the right kind of went to that same back three that we saw against Leicester where he slides over and Vega steps up. Instead of it being where we saw Cucurella played more of a wing position, Vega did step into that center mid alongside Cassidy. And it worked for the most part. I think it's still a little scary when you think about going up against even stronger opposition, because I do think it's a little bit of a weak midfield and really rough defense. But I think overall it's a strong base that against sides either Heidenheim or lower, I would say in quality, I think it's a strong setup, and it keeps us, for the most part, pretty solid back there. Starting from the right side, Disasi, a very up and down game from him again. He has a lot of these performances where he'll have a couple of moments. He'll have like 5 to 10 minutes where he'll just be looking phenomenal. On the ball, he looks comfortable. Defensively, he's making good challenges. And then all of a sudden, he'll just start making mistakes, bad passes, giving the ball away too cheaply, not defending well. It's just very all over the place for him, and he's way too inconsistent for me to really trust him. I will say also, you look at Cassaday's yellow, that doesn't happen if Disasi isn't stupid with the ball. I mean, it's literally the last minute of the game, and all you have to do is just put it across, take it to the corner, just don't give it away cheaply. So he gives it away cheaply, and now they're breaking down the field. And like I said, Cassaday, little nudge on the guy, and that's enough to get him sent off. So it starts, though, from Disasi making that dumb decision to hold on to it way too long and get it stripped. In the middle, Tosin, thought had a pretty solid game overall. Not perfect. He definitely has his gaps in the game still, but I still look at his overall performances, and I still think he's a better option than Fofana. I think maybe Fofana, the only thing he has over him is he has a bit more pace, but that's about it. And defensively, on the ball, he looks so much more comfortable than Fofana does, and I think he's a much more mature player. I do think the one thing he needs to add to his game, since he is the most experienced player, because we know we're not going to go get another Silva because the transfer team doesn't want to go get older players. But since he is the most experienced player, I would like to see him maybe be a bit more of a leader back there. I think there are several moments where you can see there's some disorganization. And it was a little too easy to play through us a couple of times. Now, granted, we did actually have some moments where we were doing a good job of holding the line and playing players offside. We did do that pretty well a couple of times. So it's not like throughout the entire match we were looking disorganized. But I do think there are moments where you could see it's a lack of communication. Players don't know who to pick up whenever it's coming at us really fast. And I think that's where you need a more experienced head that can guide the players around him. And I think Tosin, because of the fact that he's a bit older and he has more experience, should be doing that. I just don't see him doing it enough, unfortunately. And the Badiashile on the left obviously had a good game against Leicester and unfortunately came into this one and was put under a lot more pressure. So we did see the bad of Badiashile again today. And it comes down to there are too many moments where he's not reading the play fast enough. It's really funny because I know I've said this before. When he first came in, he was a little bit slower, but there was composure. It felt like he was reading the game well on the ball defensively. It felt like he was not slow. He was just very controlled in what he did, but he read the game so well that it never felt like there was any concern. Now he's still playing at that same pace, the same tempo, but there's less awareness, and so he's getting into trouble more often. It happens on both sides, whether he's on the ball or whether he's defending. He's just not reading situations very well. And I've said it before, but that slow touch on the ball where he's just kind of walking out, it's not helping us. I remember there was a moment where Tosin was coming up with the ball, and he was coming up not walking, but also not running. He was somewhere in between. He's taking touches, but he's on his toes. And then as soon as pressure comes, takes a quick touch and plays it into the midfield because he's ready for that. With Badiashile, he's walking. Pressure comes. There's that pass to midfield, but it's too late because he's on his heels. He's not ready to make the pass. So I don't know where that's coming from. I don't know who said it's okay for him to do that, but it's just too slow more often than not. He definitely had good moments throughout the game. He had some good passes, a couple of decent defensive decisions, but similar to Disasi, it was kind of hit or miss whether you're going to get a good version of him or a bad version of him in any moment. Into the midfield, Vega, I thought had another pretty solid game. I do think this is more suited to his quality at the moment, at least. I think he can get better, but I think we saw against Newcastle, he was kind of not quite up to the pace of the Premier League. I think this is a pace that he is more comfortable playing in because he made a lot of really good passes. Defensively, I thought he made some good challenges as well. He's a player that can do both sides of the ball pretty well, and he does invert from that fullback position well too. So he's a player that I think, given more time, given more experience, he can get up to a Premier League level, but right now, I think it's still too soon to throw him in there. So these types of games really show that he's comfortable playing in that position, and we see what he's capable of doing whenever he's in there, because honestly, a lot of the play does tend to come through him, and he makes good passes to set the play up. But yeah, I just don't think he's at the Premier League pace yet. And given maybe a couple of games against, I wouldn't mind seeing him in the games against like Southampton or Ipswich, some of those lower level Premier League sides. I think those would be good games to kind of get him a little bit more accustomed to it before we chunk him into the deep end like what we saw against Newcastle. Cassidy alongside him probably would have been in my top, I would say 4 or 5 players in this match, if not for the red card. And again, I do think it was soft. I do think it was a soft second yellow to give. However, I will say one thing I do remember very vividly about Cassidy is when he first came in and he was playing for the U21s. I remember seeing he got sent off, I think within his first 2 matches playing for the U21s. And then he comes back. I think he plays a couple more and then he gets sent off again. And I just remember thinking, why? Obviously, I wasn't watching those matches at the time, but it was sort of concerning that this new guy comes in and he gets sent off pretty quickly twice within the first run of matches that he was in there. So now I think it sort of shows he's still a little raw. He still makes some poor decisions. I think, in fact, there was a moment in the first half after he got the yellow where I don't remember who was, I think it might have been Tosin, played him a little bit of a hospital ball, and the striker came in to collect, and he goes sliding in to win it. And he doesn't catch the ball, but he also didn't catch the player, thankfully. But I just remember seeing that challenge. He's already on a yellow, and I thought, what are you doing? Like, I already knew he gets sent off later in the match, but I'm thinking he could have been sent off there if he caught the player. That could have been him gone. Actually, it was in the second half, now I'm thinking about it. You're risking that. And again, while it is a soft yellow, you putting contact from behind as this guy is breaking away, it gives the player that chance to go over and the ref to give you that second yellow. So he's got to be smarter with some of those decisions, because clearly this is not the first time this has happened. I don't know how he got sent off in those matches for the U21s when he first came in, but clearly this has happened before. He's got himself sent off probably for a dumb decision before. So it's frustrating because it was an overall really good performance from him. I thought he comfortably handled his position in there well, got on the ball, made some stuff happen, good defensive challenges. There was one in particular that was really well handled. I mean, guys breaking into pace at the box. Cassidy just sort of comes in, reaches a long leg around and pokes the ball away. Very Nemanja Matic, the more I think about it. A lot of his game, a lot of his performance today was good, and then he gets himself sent off, and that leaves a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth. So he's got to learn from this and hopefully grow out of it so we don't see that too much more often. The other midfielder was Dewsbury-Hall, and I don't want to be too mean to him, but outside of the pass that he made to set up Sancho for the Mudryk goal, not a good game. Probably our weakest performance on the night, and that includes somebody that I haven't gotten to yet that I will. But yeah, he just overall not good. Giving the ball away too easily, defensively, getting beat out of too many challenges. It was just not a good performance from him overall tonight, and it kind of shows that all of these players are playing pretty well against a Heidenheim side that is flying high, is a good quality side, maybe not phenomenal, but yeah, I would, again, League One championship side, gonna give us a bit of a challenge, especially at their place. Most everybody had a decent-ish game at least. I look at Dewsbury-Hall and think you had a poor game. There was not much you did that helped us. There's a lot of stuff you did that maybe you gave the ball away a little too cheaply and gave them too many chances. I don't think he's cut out to play for us. And again, I know some of this is down to money stuff, but all I can think is if you wanted to sell Gallagher to do the financial stuff and make sure you have all that, why do we have to go get somebody like Dewsbury-Hall? Why couldn't we maybe rely on our youth? Why couldn't we maybe go get somebody in the Premier League? Somebody from one of the lower sides that maybe is not the highest quality, but maybe somebody younger that could give us some quality going forward. I don't know. It feels like a weird decision to bring him in, and he has not proven me wrong so far in my opinions of he was kind of a waste of money, if I'm being honest. Especially, again, we sold Gallagher to make that money. We used some of that money to buy him. And that replacement is definitely not at all working out for us. But going on to the wings, first of all, Sancho, probably my man of the match. Yeah, he got himself 2 assists. Overall, his play on the ball was really a good quality performance, kept possession really well too. A lot of stuff he did was very dangerous, and he created a lot of good chances for us, a couple that probably should have been finished. But yeah, overall, I think it's a good showing for him. And while I do think he's probably a bit better coming in off the left, I think that's probably something we'll see if Neto comes back fully fit. I think we probably will see Sancho on the left, Neto on the right going forward, because Madueke still has not really gotten back to what we saw in the Wolves' performance. So I expect the two of them, Neto and Sancho, to be our wings. And I think it'll allow both of them to come in off the wings like they like to do. And at that point, I do expect to see Sancho playing at his best. But yeah, I was a little worried about him, though, when he was out for those couple weeks. I was worried it wasn't a sickness or something else, but he came in and it looked like he's working hard. Looks like he's enjoying himself out there, so good to see. On the left side, Mudryk, I think very telling that once we scored the goal, all of a sudden he became a lot more involved and a lot more effective going forward, because I think that's when the game became a lot more his type of game, where it's a lot more up and down the field. They're stepping out a lot more, which gives him more space to run in behind. That's where he's a lot more comfortable. And obviously the goal is very well taken, but I still do look at him and go, needs a little bit more. And I think it's mainly in the first half. I want more from him. I want him to grow out of just, if it's an open game where he's got space to run, then he's effective. But every other type of game, if the team's sitting in, he's not really going to be that effective for you. You might get some good touches, some dangerous runs, but he's not really going to create much for you. And that's been a problem since he's come in, and is still not changing. So kind of makes you go, well, maybe it's time for him to move on. And hey, I think he's played well enough in the Conference League this season. I think we probably could get a little bit of decent money for him. Probably not what we paid, but still enough to justify letting him go. But going to Nkunku, I do think he looked a lot more comfortable sitting in behind a striker. It allowed him to make some runs off of Guiu as well, which I think helped him. I do think his finishing's got to improve. There were several moments where what we were seeing from Nkunku earlier this season, I think he would have finished, but he's very clearly mentally dealing with something right now, whether it's he thinks he should be starting over Jackson and he's not, or he thinks he should just be in the first team picture and he's not. I don't know what's going on with him, but clearly he's not playing with the same confidence we saw earlier this season, because the first one in the first half that he chips over the goal, that would have been a finish from Nkunku. The one where Felix sends him through on goal, that would have been a finish from an earlier Nkunku this season. So he's not playing at his best right now, and I think the finishing is the big part of that needs to improve. But his overall play felt much better with him coming deeper, receiving the ball, trying to make passes happen. That feels a lot more comfortable for him, in my opinion. So good to see that. Don't know the shot that he had at the end that was saved, that Felix sent him through on goal. I don't know if that was just him running himself out and he was just feeling it at that point. That's why he wanted to come off, or if he did something, or if he was just embarrassed that he missed a one-on-one chance and he was like, I'm hurt, sub me off. But either way, I hope it's not an actual injury, and I hope he can continue to improve, because we have been missing that prime Nkunku that we saw earlier this season, that was coming off the bench and winning games for us, or was just dominating teams in the Conference League. And then up top, Guiu. Like I said, Dewsbury-Hall, it was the worst performance, but Guiu is a very close second, not because of his performance, but because the quality has just got to improve. He had so many good chances that should have been goals. And I know he's young, 18, 19, he's young. And he's playing in this game where he's not really had that many opportunities this season. Most of them have been off the bench, and they've been against easier sides, so he's not really had much of a challenge to really push himself. So obviously that's going to affect him a bit, but my God, how many chances do you need? Because he had several that I'm thinking that's a goal. And then he either puts it too close to the keeper, or he hits the defender, or he just mishits it. It's got to get better. Unless we go get a better secondary striker, we need Guiu to improve. Because I think his overall work rate and his ability to have some interplay between him and Nkunku, or him and the wings, we saw a couple of moments where I think he showed his quality. He showed that on the ball he can be solid. It's the finishing, though, that he's got to improve on, because he's the one getting into these spaces more often than not. And if he's not finishing those chances, well, then we're probably going to be struggling. We're probably going to have issues throughout the match, because we can't keep wasting chances like that. So I am hoping that once he maybe puts in a couple more, because I know he has scored. I can't remember if he scored against Noah or if it was an earlier match, but I know he has already scored technically his first Chelsea goal. But I'm really hoping that if he can bang in a couple more, we will see the confidence grow. We will see him maybe start to find the net a bit more often. Kind of what we saw going from last year Jackson to where Jackson is now. I think the overall performances from Jackson last season were pretty good. It was the finishing where he was really lacking. I see a lot of similarities there with Guiu. Obviously, he's younger and he's not the same quality of player that Jackson is, but I think there is that similar feeling of he's lacking confidence, and so he's not really taking these shots very well. And if he does get that confidence, maybe we will see him start to finish more often and be this good secondary striker that we need in this competition. As far as the subs that came off the bench, first one was Felix on for Guiu. And that one basically just kind of put it back to what we're used to seeing. I'm sure he was managing Felix's minutes since he played on the weekend. And at that point, yeah, we did see a little bit more quality up front. I do think that pass through from Felix that sent Nkunku in just shows how much quality he has. I don't understand all the hate he's been getting recently. I've seen some people talking about him as if he's just the biggest flop. He needs to be so much better. We don't really need him. Every time I watch him play, he's got a lot of quality and he looks dangerous, and he does put in some good balls, create some really good chances. I think he's a good player, and I think he's a good asset to have, whether it's playing alongside Palmer, whether it's him coming off the bench and creating something, but he works his butt off. And he is a dangerous player. His finishing does need to improve, but that's about it. That's the only thing I can think of as far as where he needs to improve. Every other part of his game, I think he's doing really well right now. And then Chukwuemeka comes on for Nkunku. That's where it kind of got a little messy for me as far as who was playing where. I think Mudryk was sort of playing up top or in the middle alongside Felix, and Chukwuemeka was coming in off the left. I didn't really see too much from Chukwuemeka. I'm disappointed that he's not been given more of a chance, because I do think he looked a good, solid young player last season when he was not injured. So I'm sad that he hasn't been given more of a chance to show what he can do, but nothing I can do about it. It's clear Maresca doesn't really fancy him, so we'll just be, I guess, seeing him come off the bench a couple of times before he probably goes out on loan in January. And then the final two subs were two young players. Another appearance from George, which both of these came so late that it didn't really matter, but then the Rak-Sakyi, I think, is his name. I don't remember now, but yeah, just two moments for these 18-year-old kids to get on there and have a few minutes to just run around, see what you can do against this pretty quality German side. And for the most part, they didn't really do anything wrong, I guess. So good for them. But yeah, all in all, it's a good performance. It's a good win. We are one of, I think, 2 teams that have won every single match so far this Conference League season. And with that in mind, I mean, it's nice to see that we're getting the job done still. And I do think, based on, because I looked at the rest of the teams, because now I'm going to start doing some research before I go into these games, just to be sure that I'm not missing anything about these teams. But I do think Heidenheim is probably going to be our toughest test looking at it. So with that in mind, I mean, I'm glad we managed it pretty well. Again, it's a good test for this second team to give themselves an actual quality team that is not going to be too tough for them to go up against. It's a good measure of where they are. And I think they stood up and they showed they have enough quality to get the job done. I think defensively, we still look very susceptible with these defenders in there. I think Jorgensen, though, stepped up in those moments whenever they were caught lacking. And I think the attack created some good chances. The finishing is lacking a little bit, but I think the fact that they are creating those chances is good to see. And I'm looking at a lot of these players and going, none of them really are breaking into the first team outside of probably Sancho. And obviously, Nkunku is coming off the bench. Mudryk's probably coming off the bench. But looking at some of the other players, again, I do think Tosin is showing enough quality to be in consideration for starting in defense for us over Fofana. I think for Cassidy, the red card didn't do him any favors, but I think his overall performance was enough to at least say that he is comfortable filling in if we need him to. I think Vega as well showed once again that he's got quality there. It's just given himself a chance to get up to that pace of the Premier League. And then again, Jorgensen made a very good case for himself to start sometime soon. So maybe we'll see him in some of the midweek Premier League games, possibly. I do wonder how those are going to be handled, since it does feel like we are sort of setting up to get to that point with this second team where we don't have to play all of our best players on the weekend and then also midweek. But I don't think we're going to be seeing a full switch in those matches. Now, will it be Jorgensen? Will it be Sanchez? That we'll wait to see. But I think looking at it, probably some of the players, you look at like Palmer might get a rest. Jackson might get a rest. Neto, Madueke, if they're playing on the weekend, they'll probably get a rest. But I'm thinking like Caicedo, probably the 2 center defenders. Those players should probably stay in for the Premier League because that's a game you do want to win. And it's not going to be as easy as these conference league games. With all that being said, though, those are my thoughts on the game, so let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on the game? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Chelsea reviews. Also, check out the channel. We have a couple Let's Play series as well as a ton of TV show reviews on there. So check those out if you have time. But until next time, I hope you guys have a great day, and I will talk to you all later. Peace out.